Oh, hey out there. Welcome back to Tiny Little Victories, the podcast that talks to humans who are changing our world. I am still your host, Jennifer Kite-Powell, and on today's show, we're going to talk about dirt. Yeah, dirt or soil, if you'd like to make it sexier. And I know that there are some people out there who might be thinking, soil, dirt, I don't want to talk about that. Well, you don't have to talk. You can just listen. And so even if you turn your TV on right now, you might see Martha Stewart has a new commercial and she's out there stumping for organic soil, now calling herself a dirt nerd. Respect, Martha, because I do think we need to think more about what our soils are doing, even if they're in our backyards and we're making healthier soils so we can grow those perfect tomatoes or those eggplant or okra, as in the case for me this summer. It's important to understand what can make our soils healthy. And on that note, the bad news is, hey, our soils are not healthy. They are in really, really bad shape right now. And so there's a lot of things we need to do to make soil better because guess what? Guess what? The one thing we all have in common is we eat food. And if we can't grow food because the soils are polluted, contaminated, or just been used to death and there's no more nutrients in them, then we're not going to have any food. And that's not going to work for a lot of us. So, soil has a microbiome, just like the microbiome in our digestive systems. And so, how do we help make the soil better and heal that microbiome? Well, our next guest, Kathryn Radovan, co founder and senior vice president of business operations at Terravera, is going to tell us how she is doing that with her company. Now, this did come from her deciding that she thought her kids deserved a better future, which I love. And she began to look at what are better ways to make the soil healthier and how can we use nature to show us a blueprint, which is what they did, to create an amino acid that is used in nature to treat and fertilize and, dare I say, clean soils. So she's going to talk a little bit about how she got to that invention and why it is the first of its kind for agriculture companies. Because once this is sprayed on the crop, it actually goes back into the ground and gives it all sorts of yummies and things like that to make it healthier. So we're going to talk about that. She also has an 85-foot ficus tree in her backyard. She lives in Coconut Grove, Florida, and she can see from that tree clear to the sea, which I think is pretty cool. So get ready to get your soil knowledge on with our next guest, Kathryn Radovan. Here we are again. A podcast starts on Tiny Little Victories and the guest is laughing. I think I'm doing something right. Kathryn, so happy you could be here from Miami, Florida to talk about soil.
Thank you so much, Jennifer, for having us. And I say us as in I'm
Yeah.
representing Terravera
Yeah.
and my entire team, and I'm really happy to speak with you today.
I love that that's one of the things I've noticed about your team. And just for people that are listening, if you missed the beginning, Terravera is using biomimicry to make an amino acid platform to treat the soil. So we're not using those really crappy chemical fertilizers and synthetic fertilizers. I have a lot of questions about synthetic fertilizers. And trying to make the soil better for protected cropping so we can grow our crops and eat. So, is that about right? Is that a good summary?
Yeah. So
Okay.
biomimicry technology, yeah, that's about right. The one thing I will say that makes us really unique is we're actually a foliar spray. So we actually spray it
Okay.
on top on the plant. And what makes us so
Hmm.
unique is when it actually degrades, it goes back into amino acids. So it's actually very safe for the plant and it's
Okay.
very safe for the soil, which you can't say a lot about some
No,
agricultural products out there.
no. So let's have 101 then for everybody that's listening. A foliar spray is something that you spray on the actual crop. Is that right? Like a tomato
Yes, just
plant or a blueberry
imagine a
plant.
room just getting misted. That's what, happens with Terra Vera.
Okay. And so that everybody knows, like, we are in trouble with one, our soil, and to your point of things biodegrading and going back into the soil to make better things for the soil, and also crops. Like, it's getting hotter, the soil's getting worse, we have climate change like looming, and this is affecting how growers are growing their crops. And I think so Terra Vera is interesting to me. And I think to every single person that eats food out there is interesting because we've got a real problem with how crops are treated. And so I guess my biggest question to you, other than your very interesting background, which I want to get into in a little bit, is how do you go from sort of public policy? I did a little digging on your background to like where you are now in terms of founding this company. I mean, are you a scientist? Did you start with a scientific background? Because I think you have economics background.
That is a very loaded question.
I
Um,
know. I do that. I load them up. I load them up.
so that goes back to where I grew up. So I'm based out of
Okay.
Miami. I grew up in South Florida, and
Okay.
in the 90s, you could say everything was endangered. The alligator, the manatee. So when I grew up learning about biology and environmental science, we were living in what I would consider just an ecosystem under attack. I lived near the Everglades, and pretty much all of our learnings in school was about how much overdevelopment just ruined this beautiful ecosystem that's unique. It's
Mm.
the only one in the world, and a lot of Florida's ecosystems throughout the entire state, people think it's just South Florida, but the
It's so
entire
true.
state relies on this huge, I would say, like a living organ to
Yeah.
balance the ecosystems in the Gulf Coast and the Atlantic. And I saw just firsthand on field trips,
Yeah.
things were really threatened, and a lot of it was overdevelopment, agriculture, runoff coming from the
Mm.
Gulf, coming from the north. And I'm happy to say now, having moved back to Miami a couple years ago, the manatee is no longer endangered. The alligator's definitely not endangered. They're
Yeah.
no
Yeah.
longer on these lists that say they're almost going to be gone from this world. That's
Eh,
what gives me hope about Terra Vera and what we're doing
yeah.
is it's not going to be an overnight success story, but you have
Mhm.
to start somewhere. And when I was growing up, that's when we started. We started protecting them, changing the way we as society live together and coexist with, unique animals. Like I'm terrified of alligators, but they deserve to live.
Yeah. Yeah,
They're
exactly. They don't do.
dinosaurs.
Yeah. Yeah, and manatees as well, like, just the horror stories. I think it's interesting that you talk about, like, this only 20, over what, 20 years ago?
Yeah, 20 years ago.
20 years ago. And you're right, that is all you heard in the 90s, and it didn't help that there was Miami Vice, and then you had all these, like, boats speeding through the Okefenokee Swamp with these huge
Sure.
airboats, and it's fascinating to me that that means that at that point in time when you were young, you felt like sort of annihilation in the way of a natural environment, and now in your grown-up years, you in that 20-year span, you have seen a change, which is pretty remarkable if you think about the time it takes for humans to change their behavior.
Yes. So going back to your original question is, was I a scientist? I
Yeah.
actually gravitated towards science.
Yeah.
I thought I
Yeah.
was going to be a doctor. I
Oh,
actually started like I was head of the environmental group at my high school and started a recycling program. That interest has never left me. But when I went to college, yes, you are correct. I did major in economics. A
yeah.
lot of my economics courses were actually in environmental sustainability or economic
Ah,
development,
interesting.
public policy as well. I took the
Yeah.
coursework that was centered on either healthcare or environmental studies. And
Smart.
funny enough, I think the two are interlinked. And if people
Absolutely.
people can't draw that connection, I'd say open your
Yeah.
eyes. Like a lot
Yeah.
of what we face today as society is 100% environmentally driven. And you can see that, especially in the United States, as we're a huge melting pot. Um,
Mm.
so I thought I was gonna be a doctor in college, shifted gears. My mom was
Yeah.
not really happy.
Yeah, parents, they're amazing. They're like, "You should do this," but yet, I think your point of view kind of had a calling. Like, I don't think you have to. I'm probably going to piss off a lot of scientists here, but because I love scientists, but you can be a citizen scientist. You can care about the environment. You can care about the ecosystems, and not have that you know, that educated science degree. But I love the fact that you talk about this public policy because it is public policy that helps change some of these scientific, discoveries that then impact the environment. And you're right, there's not enough of that equilibrium between the two. There's not enough somebody thinking we need policy to be able to protect the Okefenokee, to protect the manatees.
Yeah, there I 100% agree. And, I ended up, and it's funny when you say scientist because I feel like economics really is the science of how
Science.
of like the markets and the human behaviors work. And I kind of took that into traditional corporate finance. I actually
Mhm.
worked in healthcare services, so kind of made a roundabout way. I wasn't going to be a physician, but I helped physicians, I helped hospitals. And then I kind of got the, I would say, entrepreneurial bug from my then boyfriend, now husband,
Okay.
who is
Oh,
in
what?
tech,
Okay.
who is in tech, and I don't want to say I was a little bit envious or jealous of what he
Hmm.
was doing. Not really
Yeah.
the night like the corporate punch in, punch out. Every day for him was just a different story. And so
Yeah.
when I got the opportunity to join a small company, I believe it was like the fourth employee at the time in New York City, I kind of jumped at
Wow.
it. I never thought it was in my background, right? I did not
Really?
study software engineering. I didn't think I could actually go into a startup environment. And I really, really wanted that opportunity. So that's what I did.
Why why did you not think you could go into a startup environment? What
I,
was
you,
part
you
of
know,
your
when we were in
conversation?
I guess when I was in school, that wasn't really where people went after
True. That's
college.
true.
A lot
That's
of
true.
people went into academia or the
Mhm.
general investment banking, consulting. We weren't in Silicon Valley, we were in Chicago.
Yeah.
So, kind of our ecosystem was what I
Yeah.
knew. And then when I went to New York, it opened up a bunch of doors and I met a lot of people. I met my husband, and
Yeah.
he kind of opened up my world as to what could be out there. And I mean, I knew of Apple, I knew of these tech
Love that.
companies, but I just
Yeah.
didn't think that would ever be my landing spot. I never actually saw myself as an entrepreneur. Now, looking back on it, and
You couldn't
Carlos,
be anything else,
I
right?
just I feel like this was always going to be where I would end up. It's just
Wow.
how I think of the world. I constantly get bored if I'm not challenged or trying to figure out something. I guess just so to say, I like failing. I like the
Yeah.
idea of
Yes.
continuously getting better. And not to say that investment banking wasn't challenging, but it is a very structured environment. And it's been around for so long that
Yeah.
it kind of has its own culture, and it's a well-oiled machine
Yeah.
versus a
And a
startup.
dinosaur in a way.
Yeah. Versus a startup, it's like a toddler. I kind of see it as my like
Yeah.
children. You gotta roll over, you gotta crawl, you gotta start walking before you take off. And I just love that aspect of it.
I love that you describe that as a child because I think and your point is so valid because if you're in a startup environment or an entrepreneur, you work for yourself, I'm the same. Like it's struggle for me to be in very structured environments. Like my mind doesn't think I know our producers the same way. Like we've both tried it, but it's like blindfold us and send us out off a ledge because it just doesn't work. And I think I love the idea of life being about changes and these undulations that you get. And why should you not be challenged by the fact that you have a new risk to overcome or a new problem to solve? And I think the idea of an entrepreneur is really about problem solving to me in the truest sense. I mean, some of them today are very like, I want to make a $3 million. I don't think that's a reason to start a company. um but maybe it is. I don't know. You, I guess it is. I mean, everybody wants to make money, but
Sure.
I think when the work that you're doing, that Terra Vera is doing, I find it so interesting because here's the thing: soil and plants are not the sexiest topics in general. I find them sexy, but I think people forget without a healthy plant and healthy soil, we don't eat.
Correct.
Period.
Yes. It's funny you
And
say that because I just had that conversation with Carlos. I was like, just don't think when people hear ag
yeah,
tech, they think sexy. They're
yeah.
thinking of sexy as AI, going
Now,
to the
oh,
moon, something out there, but like soil, pesticides,
yeah,
bees, plants, you don't automatically go, "Oh my gosh, tell me more." But
yeah,
the way I always try to frame it to is exactly what you said was,
yeah,
imagine you're trying to serve dinner to your kids and
and you can't.
a third of your food just goes away, poof. Because
Yeah,
that's what happens if you don't have a honeybee. and
You know what? You're
it's
speaking my
just
language here. You're speaking my language here because I know this about you, and I know that Terravera has another Apivera. You've started another business unit that's focused on
it's
bees. But the thing that's so interesting about what you've created, why it makes me mad that the world can't be like, this is the coolest thing. I'm sorry, I don't care about the Cybertruck from Elon Musk. It's the ugliest, crappiest piece of like Tonka toy material I've ever seen in my life. I mean, do we really need that? No, but we need to eat. And I am a beekeeper myself. And so, you know, having knowing that what a bee can do, and I tell people all the time, do you know if we lose bees, nothing gets pollinated. We don't have any food. They're like, "What?" I'm like, "Yeah, they pollinate everything." So, it's hello, did you go to grammar school? Like, why is it that people can't put this together? And I I I love so much about the story that Tara Vera is telling and your passion for telling it in the way that I always tell people, "Hey, you want to eat?" Why do you think we can't get people to get on board with how sexy plants and soil are? Because I know Martha Stewart's trying right now with her commercial, like I'm a dirt
I
nerd, but
if I'm being completely honest, I think we
yeah,
just have so many distractions
yeah,
to be like, there are very few times where I could sit outside and just appreciate, and I think I was actually doing this. I have a very old ficus tree in my backyard. Some
oh
say
wow,
it's 2 to 400 years old. It's large.
what?
Um, and it's, it clearly has seen a lot in its time, and so
Yes,
we were trying to rejuvenate, make it healthy, to kinda like when we
mm,
cut our hair, and I just was
yeah,
staring at it and no phone, nothing. I
love
was
that.
just looking at once upon a time, some bird dropped a
Okay.
seed,
Yes,
and it's and that was it. It wasn't like someone planted this tree, this was natural. And now look where it is. Now look what's been built around it. My
mm,
house, my neighbors, the city of Miami. Like, I live in the
mhm.
city of Miami, and I'm sure if I climbed to the top of this tree, I could
Yeah.
see every skyscraper I could see for miles because Florida's flat. I could
Yeah,
see the
I know.
ocean.
Yeah,
And I really think, and I'm kind of guilty of this. I get
yeah,
distracted. I got my
yeah.
phone, I got my screens, my TV, my children, but I don't think
Iguanas.
people.
Yeah.
That's actually, it's pretty grounding to see there's an iguana swimming in my pool
Yeah.
or
That
a
I mean,
snake is
I
waiting for me in my front door, but
in Miami, in the heart of
in a
Miami, like, where you
city,
can see the sea in
yes.
the city, yeah.
In a city, I am
Survival.
just surrounded by wildlife, and I go back to it.
Mm,
I am in their environment, and I
mhm.
just
Yeah.
maybe it's because I used to live in New York City and Chicago where it was
Yeah.
a concrete jungle. I think Miami's a little bit different
Yes.
because it's built along the water. It's built. I live in the oldest part of
Yeah.
Miami in Coconut
Sounds
Grove, which
beautiful.
is from the
Huh.
1800s. So they try to preserve as much of the city as possible. And I look at it and I'm like, wow, this is really beautiful. I'm thankful for the day that I see blue skies. I just don't think we stop and even take 30
Yeah.
seconds to appreciate
Yeah.
it. Um,
Yeah.
so I feel like if we took mini daily vacation just to unplug and appreciate, trust me, my like I said, my husband's in tech. We're really busy. We're
Yeah.
running at 100 miles an hour.
Yeah.
We do talk about like the Cybertruck, the new car that came out, how everything's being electrified. Like,
Yeah.
but it's funny. It's when I actually got pregnant that we started to talk about what's in our food,
Really?
what's best for us,
Mhm.
how would this impact our daughter at the time. It was
Yeah.
2021. And I
Mhm.
think that's when we stopped and really thought about what is our food system? What are we putting into our bodies? What could I possibly pass on to her? What happens when she isn't getting fed by me, but is starting to eat what we buy in the grocery store?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's funny because 2 years prior to her, I started Terravera with Justin and Carlos. And I always knew I wanted a family, but I think at that moment, I kind of pumped the brakes and it became personal for me. Um, because now I was, you know, as this tree will definitely outlive me,
Yeah.
what am I leaving behind? And am I leaving it better than when I found it? And I just like I said, AI is great, the Cybertruck, it speaks to certain people,
Yeah.
but
I don't know who those people are.
is that going to make the world a better place? I don't know. And I actually talked to my husband. I feel so happy and fortunate
Mm.
that I have a Carlos calls it an emotional bank account. It's
Oh
not
my
just
god,
about
I
making
love that.
money,
I love that phrase, an
but an
emotional
emotional
bank
bank
account.
account where
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
wake up every day and it is just fulfilling. I am getting paid, but in something that cannot be actually taken to a Chase Bank or a Wells Fargo.
But isn't that more about, like, there's an Italian, creative guru, for sake of a better word, and he talks about, it's not about the result, it's about the experiences that you gained along the way and how you transplant that to impact new lives in the future. Like,
Yeah,
that's his whole trajectory, and so you're it's so overwhelmingly empowering to hear you say these things, because imagine if there were, like, more voices like yours out there. And I'm picturing this tree now in your yard. You're gonna have to send me a picture later. But 400 years in a society, I think a lot, Miami did a lot of development without caring
it
about the environment.
it
That
did.
tree is still there. And then the next thing is, how tall does a ficus tree get? Because if you like I can't even imagine what this thing looks like. Mine get to like this tall and then they die. So
It's
this thing has been kept
it's
alive for a while.
tippy top. It's probably in the ballpark, or it was before I had to give it a little bit of a trim. It
Yeah.
was pushing
Get those dead ends
85,
off.
almost 100 feet, and it's not the
Stop it.
largest tree in my neighborhood. It definitely was trimmed and cut and stunted when development was
Mm.
happening, but
Mhm.
it's living proof that you could
Yeah.
really coexist with nature, and that's kind of what
Yeah.
Terra Vera is. It's we can't
Yeah.
reverse our progress and our technology. I don't think anybody wants to, but
No.
we want to make sure that in 20, 30, 50, 100 years, we could still coexist and grow our population, but we don't have to devastate it in the process. And like I said before, when my story of my childhood about the alligators and the manatees, I think people are so used to quick fixes. This is not one of them. Like, unfortunately, this is going to be something we see over decades, but you have to start now, and you can't get uh, demoralized or just feel like people aren't listening. This is not a sexy topic. You just got to keep going and pushing and hoping
Yeah.
to inspire people. And that's kind of what I think Apavera has been, which we never ever thought we would be helping beekeepers. I will say that with complete honesty in 2019. But
Yeah.
as with most breakthroughs in technology, things are happy accidents, and that was what
Yeah.
Apavera was for us.
Let's take a detour to bees then, because I think bees are sexy. And I know that you guys were, I think when we first got sort of connected, there was like looming in the distance this, oh, by the
Yes.
way, you were very on record of saying, like, I don't know, forget about the bees because of X, Y, and Z. But now, in that time to now, there is this new business unit which does focus on um bee health and helping people that are commercial beekeepers and how that contributes to the whole ecosystem. So, talk to me a little bit about, I mean, it seems like a natural progression, but was there like an aha moment, like for you when you guys were at the company, or did you think we
It
got to add this
it's
in?
a really funny story of how we even got to bees, but we were
Well,
preparing
love that.
we were preparing for a conference and we thought a great idea, proof is in the pudding. Why don't we just show people what we do rather than tell them? So we were going to do a live demo on powdery mildew, which is a very common fungus on plants. It could be devastating for plants such as strawberries. You might lose like harvest or yields. It's not going to kill your plant, but it's going to stunt it, and it's
Oh,
you're not going to get what
I've
you
got
want out of it.
I'm a fruit tree person in my garden, and I had powdery mildew is almost the worst thing that can happen. I had to remove a whole plum tree.
Yeah.
Like, it's annoying.
So it's definitely a devastating pathogen to see in your garden, and we were like,
Yes.
"Okay, we're gonna try and find some plants that have powdery mildew, and we're gonna demonstrate live under a microscope what we can do." So the fun part was it was trying to track down plants that had powdery mildew. In Albuquerque, we were getting into the winter season, so no plants had them. Finally, someone on our team found it in a food market, goji plants. And I was like, "Go buy them. Whatever they have, just go buy them all." They had powdery mildew. We were like, "Yes, this is great. This is going to be wonderful." Fast forward a week prior to the conference, magically all the plants are healthy. I don't know what my CTO did,
Oh,
where he put them in his house, but they were magically healed.
no more powdery mildew,
No,
just like
no, no more. So we were
just
like,
fired.
"Oh
Yeah.
no, what are we gonna do?" He said,
Yeah.
"Hold on, they are infested with aphids." And I'm like, "Aphids?" I'm like, "Well, how did that happen?" He's like,
How do
"Well,
you
let me
go
see
from
if I could try
powdery
and."
mildew, right?
Exactly. I was like, "Well, let me try and." He's like, "I'm gonna see if we could kill these buggers." He didn't think much of it. We killed them. Like, we were able to kill them within minutes, and then we did a couple of tweaks within a week to make sure the kill
Mhm.
time was even better than the first time.
Mhm.
By the time we got to the conference, we were killing aphids left and right under the microscope. People just
What?
they were just like, "Wow, I can't believe it." And that was kind of where we honestly looked at each other. We started this
Interesting.
company more on the microbial side and treating like viruses, bacteria, fungi. And then we started to go into the nutrient side. But then we were like, wait a minute, there's an entire new area of pests we can treat, the soft bodied pests. So that is where aphids, mites come into play. Um, and that's the varroa mite, as you're probably well aware.
Yes, that oh, I you know what? My grandfather kept bees and there was no varroa mites in this country
Yes.
when he did bees, and I cursed these people, this whatever happened to bring in this varroa mite because I know you probably know this, but in Australia, they didn't have
Yep.
any varroa mite until recently.
Yep. Yep.
Oh,
Unfortunately, with technology and globalization, we're all interconnected. All it
yeah.
takes is for one shipment of hives from one side of the continent to
Just
another to just really spread the joy. And that's unfortunately what has happened with the Varroa.
yeah.
We have some partner beekeepers that were willing
Mhm.
to lend their hives because at the end of the day, they were going to lose the hives to the Varroa. So they're like,
Yeah,
sure,
that's
go ahead and
cru I
spray.
mean, yeah, and this is the foliate spray that you're talking about
Yes,
that
the
you guys
foliar
created
spray.
that's
So that's
all organic and natural, yeah.
that's the beauty of it. It's a kind of, I call it a spa treatment for the beehives.
I
They
love that.
they actually love it. So we initial success there, we were like, okay, maybe we have something. Fast forward, it's January 2024. Carlos goes to the big bee conference that happens every January, and he is just getting pulled into
I'm
conversations.
sure.
And
Mhm.
he's like, wait, you have something that can treat the varroa. And I don't think I've ever seen this in my career where there's been such a
Yeah,
strong market pull. And
yeah,
that's kind of where we regrouped again and said, "Hey,
so smart.
is this something that we just can't ignore anymore?" Like beekeeping
Yeah,
was going to be maybe an industry we looked at a couple years down the road. Ends up we pulled that timeline in dramatically, and for this last year, it's amazing what we've done in the 9 months.
yeah,
We've
I've been
launched
seeing all the trials and
Yeah,
some of the
we've launched a huge brand. We, added Dr. Jeff Pettis as a technical
Oh,
advisor,
yeah, yeah,
and it's kind of just been a very, very fast year, but we are really
yeah,
very
that's
excited
great.
to launch our new brand that is catered towards saving the bees because
Yeah,
honestly, as you put it, without the bees, we don't have food. Whether or not you like the bees, whether you've been stung by a
yeah,
bee, they do
you
such a
know, they do an amazing job, but I tell people all the time, because I could talk about bees for another 3 hours, is that, most of the time it's probably a bee that didn't sting you. It's probably a, like, yellow jacket. I call them the sloppy moppies, the bumblebees, which are the cutest things, but they just, like, flop around in a flower, and it's usually when you go to smell something, that bumblebee is like, "Ouch," and I just find that my bees are Apis melliflora, and they are so gentle. Like, the
Mhm.
stings from those, it'd be like, "Oops, bad mosquito bite." And I think people have still today, Catherine, and that's why I love what you're doing. Now, we're going to put a lot of stuff in the show notes about this, but people still can't, for some reason, bees. Like, you guys get it together. You're studying it in school. It doesn't look like a yellow jacket. It's not a wasp, and they pollinate everything, every single thing. And they're hungry. So in June when we get into the dearth season, when, there's not enough pollen going around and you see a bee on your Coca-Cola can, they're starving. That's
Yes.
starving. And so I say, let him have the sugar. What's the big
Yep.
whoopie doop? And people are just so ignorant in a way to the nature's ecosystem that it creates for us. Like you said, you're living in their world. We're living in their world. And I love it doesn't surprise me that you had beekeepers, because I experienced some commercial beekeepers this summer, and those people work so hard for so
Oh
little.
my gosh.
I mean, the amount,
Yeah.
bees, they make 1 teaspoon of honey in their whole entire teeny tiny short lifespan. The amount of work a commercial beekeeper does, shout out to all commercial beekeepers and Apivera, is insane. And most of them are not even digital. It's like hard labor, constantly checking hives. Like, it's
Yes.
amazing we have honey. So people stop wasting honey.
Yes, it's a labor of love. Honey goes back centuries. It is
Centuries.
highly prized. Actually, I actually got educated on this. Honey doesn't really expire. There is
Yes, I
there's
was
some
yes.
really, really old honey found, I believe in Egypt. They're like one of the original
Oh my god,
beekeepers.
are you my mother? Are you my mother? Because she told me the story about this honey in Egypt. And here's my honey. Here's my honey,
Yes.
my little honey jars, and I've just bottled my batch of honey. Yeah.
So
Egypt. And
it
yet, and yet,
it's still good, and,
yeah.
to me, it has so many healing properties that's seen around the world, and then what makes me really sad, and I always say buy local, is a lot of the stuff people are like, "Oh, we have so much honey on the shelves." A lot of that is not pure honey.
It's
It's
mixed. It's
it's
cut like
mixed,
really
yes,
cocaine. Yeah.
but it's not like they have to advertise that. So, people think, "Oh, we
Yes.
have an abundance of honey." You talk to any commercial beekeeper, they cannot
Yeah.
produce enough honey.
Yeah.
They cannot get enough
Yeah.
bees to help pollinate some of the crops as they kind of go around the United States. It's kind of sad that we had to lose almost half of our
I
colonies
know.
in
I know.
2022, 2023, that year. It's just people don't think about that,
Heartbreaking. It's
but
heartbreaking, and yeah, I mean, they don't think about it, and you're right. That stuff on the shelves is cut with something else, with corn
yeah.
syrup or fructose or sugar, and I dropped off a couple jars to my neighbor on the other side, and she goes, "Well, this is really local honey." I'm like, "Yeah, literally, I'm behind that fence." And you think about the urban beekeeper or the backyard beekeeper, and then you're talking about these commercial beekeepers that are making honey, selling that local honey, and the amount of movement of bees from, Texas to North Dakota to California. You can see where I have varroa mites, but like, this beekeeper I know, she's a commercial beekeeper, and she must work like every day, all the time, out in hives, out in fields. And this concept of you guys having this aha moment with beekeepers like, help us, is so smart, because yeah, it's really smart. Bees die, we don't eat.
Yeah, so this goes actually back to, and this was a nice, I would say, segue for Terra Vera, because Terra Vera
Yeah.
was really started to make agriculture sustainable.
Mhm.
Sustainable for the environment, and then for the farmer, and then like you mentioned, beekeepers, I kind of clump them into agricultural producers. They don't make a
Yeah.
lot of money. They
Mm-mm.
A lot of them don't actually have a computer to replace their job.
I know, I know,
They
I
have to
know.
be out in the fields. People say, "Oh, well, you have big machinery." It says, "Yeah, but would you want a robot to cut your hair? Probably not. It's probably
Mm-mm.
not going to be that great. Yes, you'll have the snips, but is it going to be the art form that you want.
And they're
And
aging. The average age of a farmer is 60.
correct. And unfortunately, this everything's so interconnected. You mentioned the bee wanting to go in your Coca-Cola can.
Yeah.
That's because they don't have food, and a lot of
Yep.
that has to do with what we've sprayed, and it doesn't even have to be next to a beehive. I mean, because 'cause they're
Yeah.
foragers, they will
Yeah.
fly wherever they need to
Up to
go.
5 miles to get
Yes.
food.
So, in a weird way, agriculture needs bees, but they've also been
Yeah.
poisoning the bees. We've been poisoning
Mm.
the bees, we've been destroying their
Yeah.
habitats, the climate
Yeah.
change has been, impacting them, and the pesticides that get sprayed on our crops or even on lawns, a lot of people don't realize it's not big
Yes,
farms. It's
Catherine. Yes.
local people,
Yes.
what you put on your grass or around to get rid of mosquitoes, those are also
Yes. Oh, this
impacting the bees.
mosquito. Yeah. My neighbors are all organic heads. I hope they're not listening to this podcast. They're vegetarians. They're very nice people. They have an adorable baby who I love. And they're so caring. And they used to have somebody come out and spray. And then I was like, you guys, look, you eat organic, you buy organic, you're vegetarian, you're putting poison on your yard. A little squirrel runs across that, then runs across your back deck. I have bees across the street. And they're like, oh my God, we didn't even think about it. And they're smart people. They are
Yeah,
not smart people. And I think the more stories like Apivera, Terra Vera, what you're doing, these very powerful sound bites you're giving are really about, I'm hearing, think about the connectivity between yourself and the natural world. And
sure.
you're right, spraying mosquito repellent affects everything around you. And yeah, I think it's such a critical story to tell. So you've been listening to Kathryn Radovan, who is the Senior Vice President of Operations and co-founder of Terra Vera. Kathryn, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much, Jennifer, for having me. It's been a pleasure.